You know, there's something rather dangerous about spiritual awakening that nobody in the self-help industry wants you to know. Not because it's mystical or secretive, but because it would undermine the entire business model they've built around enlightenment. They sell you awakening as the solution to all your problems, as the doorway to perpetual bliss, as the achievement that will finally make you special, complete, better than your former self. And they're very careful not to mention the truths that would make awakening far less marketable. But here's what actually happens. When you wake up, you discover things that are deeply inconvenient. Things that don't fit the Instagram spirituality narrative. Things that, if you speak them openly, will get you labeled as negative, unenlightened, or the worst sin in spiritual circles, not vibrating high enough. Have you noticed this, that there are certain truths about awakening you're not supposed to say out loud? That there's a script you're expected to follow. I'm so grateful, so blessed, so transformed, even when your actual experience is far more complex, far more challenging, far more uncomfortable than that narrative allows. But there are hidden truths about awakening. Not hidden because they're secret, but hidden because they're inconvenient, because they reveal that awakening isn't what you thought it was, because they show that the spiritual path is far stranger, far more difficult, and far less glamorous than anyone told you, right? And if you're truly awake, if you've genuinely gone through the process rather than just adopted the identity, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know these truths intimately, but you've learned not to speak them because speaking them makes people uncomfortable. Well, let's speak them anyway. Let me tell you about someone I once knew. We'll call her Maya. She had a genuine spiritual awakening after years of seeking. Not the Instagram kind where you post pictures of yourself meditating at sunrise with inspirational quotes. The real kind, the kind where your entire sense of self dissolves, where everything you thought was real reveals itself as a story, where you see through the fundamental illusion of separation. And she was excited at first. She'd finally made it. She'd awakened. She assumed this meant she'd found the answer, reached the destination, solved the puzzle of existence. So she did what many people do. She started sharing. She joined spiritual communities. She talked about her experiences. She tried to connect with others on the path. But something strange happened. The more honestly she shared about her actual experience of awakening, the more resistance she encountered. When she talked about the disorientation, the loneliness, the loss of all motivation that came after ego dissolution, people told her she wasn't truly awakened. When she mentioned that nothing felt meaningful anymore in the way it used to, they said she was depressed, not enlightened. When she described the strange flatness that replaced her emotional ups and downs, they suggested she needed therapy. Cleanser, because Maya was violating the unspoken rules. She was revealing truths that the spiritual community had collectively agreed not to mention. She was breaking the fourth wall of the Enlightenment performance. You see, there's a narrative, a script about how awakening is supposed to look and feel. You're supposed to radiate peace. You're supposed to speak in gentle tones about oneness and love. You're supposed to have transcended all problems, all suffering, all human messiness. You're supposed to be the after picture in the spiritual transformation advertisement. And if your actual experience doesn't match that script, you learn quickly to keep quiet about it. Because the spiritual community, despite all its talk of authenticity and truth, is remarkably intolerant of experiences that don't fit the approved narrative. Bendy and Maya discovered there were things you simply weren't supposed to say. You're You weren't supposed to mention that awakening can be terrifying. That ego death feels like actual death, and your body doesn't know the difference. That there are moments when you'd give anything to go back to sleep, to unknow what you now know, to return to the comfortable illusions you've lost. Mendia, you weren't supposed to admit that awakening doesn't solve your human problems. That you still have to pay bills, navigate relationships, deal with your body's limitations. That enlightenment doesn't make you immune to depression, anxiety, or physical pain. That being aware of the illusory nature of problems doesn't make the problems disappear. Jem, you weren't supposed to confess that post-awakening, you often feel more alienated than before, that you can't relate to most people anymore. That small talk feels like torture, that you're surrounded by people having passionate debates about things you can see are just different flavors of the same illusion. And you definitely weren't supposed to say that sometimes awakening feels like a curse you can't undo. That there's a profound grief in seeing through everything. That you trade some of your clarity for the ability to care about things the way unconscious people care about them. Man, these truths exist in the shadows of the spiritual community. Everyone who's genuinely awakened knows them, but nobody speaks them, because speaking them would reveal that the emperor has no clothes. Ambendia. Now, let me share the specific hidden truths that you'll rarely hear spoken openly. These are the things that genuine awakening reveals, but that spiritual teachers are remarkably reluctant to discuss. Diber and hidden truth E. Awakening destroys more than it creates. The marketing says awakening will bring you peace, joy, fulfillment. And sometimes it does, but what they don't tell you is what it takes away. Your sense of purpose gone, because you see that all purposes are arbitrary stories. Your motivation diminished because you understand that achieving things doesn't actually change anything fundamental. Your identity dissolved, leaving you wondering who's living this life if there's no you doing it. Namda man I knew, let's call him Simon, described it perfectly. They told me awakening would complete me. They didn't tell me it would annihilate me. And what's left after the annihilation doesn't have the same desires, fears, or drives. It's not depressed. It's just not motivated by the same illusions anymore. And nobody prepares you for how strange that is. Dharmarat's hidden truth.r. You can't awaken and remain the same person. Asterisk. This is the truth that spiritual seekers desperately want to avoid. They want enlightenment without ego death. They want awakening without losing who they think they are. They want the peace and bliss without the dissolution of self. But it doesn't work that way. True awakening isn't an addition to who you are. It's the subtraction of the illusion that there's a separate you. And when that illusion falls away, the person you were doesn't become enlightened. That person ceases to exist in any meaningful sense. What remains is something else. Something that looks like you, sounds like you, has your memories and your body. But it's not you, because there's no longer a you to be. It's just life expressing itself through the form that used to house a separate self. Dimber and hidden truth. Tat San. Most spiritual experiences are not awakening. Asterisk, the spiritual marketplace is full of people selling peak experiences, mystical states, temporary glimpses of unity consciousness, and calling it awakening. But these experiences, no matter how profound, are not awakening. They're experiences that happen to someone. Awakening is the recognition that there is no someone for experiences to happen to. Medamaya went through years of powerful spiritual experiences before her actual awakening. And after awakening, she could see clearly that all those experiences, the bliss states, The visions, the feelings of oneness were just more content in consciousness. Beautiful content, perhaps, but still just experiences arising and passing away. Real awakening is not an experience. It's the end of the experiencer. And most people who think they're awakened have just had really convincing experiences that the experiencer is still around to interpret and claim. Dire and hidden truth C. Awakening doesn't make you special. This is perhaps the most inconvenient truth of all. The ego loves the idea of being awakened. It's the ultimate achievement, the final proof that you're special, evolved better than the unawakened masses. So most seekers are actually seeking spiritual ego inflation disguised as enlightenment. Dalemdia, but genuine awakening reveals that there's no one to be special. No separate self to be more evolved than other separate selves. The whole game of spiritual one-upmanship is revealed as ego playing dress-up in enlightenment costumes. And paradoxically, the people who are most awake often look least spiritual. They're not performing enlightenment. They're not signaling their awakened status. They're just ordinary, living regular lives. Maybe more at peace, maybe more present, but not elevated above others in any way that would satisfy ego's need for specialness. Can bind hidden truth woo. You can't transmit awakening through words. This is why all spiritual teaching is ultimately futile. You can describe the territory, but you can't give someone the direct experience of it. You can point at the moon, but you can't make someone see it if they're not looking in the right direction. Bandi, yet the spiritual marketplace pretends otherwise. It sells books, courses, retreats, all promising to deliver awakening if you just follow the right steps. And seekers buy into this, spending decades accumulating spiritual knowledge while the actual awakening remains as distant as ever. Because awakening isn't knowledge, it's not understanding. It's a shift in the fundamental structure of consciousness that cannot be conceptualized or transmitted. It happens when it happens, for reasons that are mysterious and ultimately beyond anyone's control. Now, let's be very clear about why these hidden truths are dangerous to speak openly, because the consequences of revealing them are real and significant. Mamblin, the first danger is that you'll be rejected by spiritual communities. These communities have carefully constructed narratives about what awakening is, how it looks, what it does, and they're invested in maintaining those narratives because the narratives hold the community together, provide a shared language, create a sense of collective identity. When you reveal truths that contradict the narrative, you become a threat, not a conscious threat. Nobody will tell you you're dangerous. They'll just quietly exclude you, stop inviting you to gatherings, suggest you're not in a good space right now, hint that you've lost your way or fallen back asleep. Maya experienced this firsthand. Within months of speaking honestly about her awakening experience, she found herself persona non grata in the spiritual circles she'd been part of for years, because she was negative or toxic, but because her honesty revealed uncomfortable truths that others didn't want to face. The second danger is that you'll undermine people's spiritual seeking. Most spiritual seekers are running towards something peace, wholeness, meaning specialness. They need to believe that awakening will give them what they're seeking. When you reveal that awakening actually takes away more than it gives, that it doesn't deliver what ego wants, that it might not solve the problems they're hoping it will solve, you're threatening their entire motivation for seeking. And people don't thank you for that. They attack you for it. They call you negative, unenlightened, someone who clearly hasn't truly awakened, because if you had, you'd be blissful and grateful rather than honest about the complexity of the experience. The third danger is that you'll be labeled as having psychological problems rather than spiritual insights. Our culture has no framework for the kind of experiences that genuine awakening brings. The dissolution of self, the loss of meaning, the inability to care about things that once seemed important, the feeling of watching life happen rather than living it, these all look like dissociation, depression, or depersonalization disorder. Gene Simon was actually hospitalized at one point because a therapist didn't understand what he was describing. His explanation of no self was interpreted as a psychotic break. His lack of emotional reactivity was seen as severe depression. His inability to connect with ordinary concerns was viewed as dangerous detachment. He wasn't sick, he was awake. But the medical and psychological establishments have no category for that, so they pathologize it. The fourth danger is that you'll discourage genuine seeking by being too honest. Some argue that we should hide the difficult truths about awakening to protect seekers, to keep them motivated, to prevent them from being scared off the path before they've even begun. Dang. But this is just another form of spiritual manipulation. It's deciding that people can't handle the truth, that they need to be sold a sanitized version of awakening to keep them seeking. And it perpetuates the cycle of false expectations and subsequent disillusionment that characterizes so much of the spiritual marketplace. But now we arrive at the profound paradox that emerges when you truly understand these hidden truths. The paradox is this: the hidden truths that seem so negative, so discouraging, so contrary to the spiritual narrative, they're actually the doorway to genuine freedom. Because as long as you're seeking awakening based on false promises, you're still operating from ego. You're still trying to become someone better, achieve something special, acquire something you lack. But when you understand the real nature of awakening, that it destroys as much as it creates, that it won't solve your human problems, that it doesn't make you special, that it can't be transmitted through teaching, you stop seeking for the wrong reasons. And paradoxically, that's when real awakening becomes possible. Let me tell you what happened to Maya after she was rejected by her spiritual communities for speaking these truths. She went through a period of deep questioning. If awakening is this difficult, this isolating, this far from the promise, why did it happen? What was the point? And in that questioning, something shifted again. She realized she'd been holding on to an idea of what awakening should be, even after awakening. She'd been comparing her experience to the narrative, finding it lacking, feeling like she'd failed to achieve proper enlightenment. But when she simply accepted her actual experience without needing it to match anyone's story, extraordinary. The struggle ended. Not because circumstances changed, but because she stopped fighting reality. The hidden truths that had seemed like problems revealed themselves as simply what is. Here's the wisdom. The hidden truths about awakening are only problematic if you're still seeking awakening as an achievement. If you're trying to get somewhere, become someone, attain something. But if you're simply present with what actually is, including the uncomfortable, unmarketable, narrative-breaking truths, then there's no problem. And awakening doesn't make you perpetually blissful. It makes you radically accepting of whatever arises, including lack of bliss. It doesn't solve all your problems. It dissolves your resistance to having problems. It doesn't make you special. It reveals that the need to be special was always the problem. Simon described his post-hospitalization understanding perfectly. They wanted me to say I was happy all the time, that enlightenment had solved. But that would be a lie. What actually happened is I stopped needing things to be different than they are. I still feel pain, but I don't suffer about the pain. I still have problems, but they're just problems, not evidence that something's wrong with me. I'm not blissful, I'm at peace with not being blissful. And that's more valuable than any peak experience could ever be. So how do you navigate the path of awakening with these hidden truths in mind? How do you seek, if seeking is even the right word, when you know what's actually being offered? Handy and first, release all ideas of what awakening should look like. Every image, every story, every narrative about enlightened people being perpetually peaceful or blissful or wise, let it go. These images, their ego's fantasy of what it would be like to be ego-less, which is a contradiction that can never be resolved. Approach the path with complete ignorance, not the ignorance of not knowing anything, but the ignorance of not knowing what anything means. You might have experiences. Don't assume you know what they mean. You might have insights. Don't assume you're awakened. You might go through profound changes. Don't assume they're taking you somewhere. Maya learned to hold everything lightly. Every experience, every insight, every understanding, she stopped grasping at them as proof of progress or achievement. And in that releasing, the genuine unfolding happened naturally, without her trying to make it happen or conform to some script. Second, be ruthlessly honest about your motivation. Why are you seeking awakening? If the answer involves becoming someone better, achieving something special, escaping your current experience, being admired as enlightened, you're still operating from ego, and ego cannot achieve its own dissolution. This doesn't mean abandon the path. It means see clearly what's actually motivating you. And often, just seeing it clearly is enough for it to begin dissolving. And Simon spent a year doing nothing but watching his motivation. Every time he felt pulled to meditate, to read spiritual texts, to seek teachings, he'd pause and ask, what am I hoping this will give me? And he watched the answers arise. I want to feel special. I want to escape anxiety. I want to be admired. I want to feel like I'm getting somewhere. Just watching these motivations without judgment but with clarity began to free him from them. And third, find others who can speak the hidden truths without agenda. Not teachers selling enlightenment, not communities performing spirituality, but genuine humans who've been through the process and are willing to be honest about it. These people are rare, but they exist. And conversations with them, honest, unfiltered, narrative-breaking conversations, can be more valuable than years of sanitized spiritual teaching. But be careful. Many people claim to speak hidden truths while actually just building new spiritual identities around being the person who tells it like it is. True honesty about awakening doesn't have an agenda. It's not trying to discourage you or encourage you. It's just sharing what's actually true without concern for how it will be received. And finally, accept that the path is pathless and the goal is goalless. This is the ultimate hidden truth. There's nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, no one to become. All seeking is ultimately the ego seeking to secure itself through spiritual attainment. And genuine awakening is the collapse of that entire project, but this doesn't mean do nothing. It means do what arises naturally without the story that it's taking you somewhere. Meditate if meditation arises, but not because it will make you enlightened. Read if reading arises, but not to accumulate knowledge. Sit with teachers if that arises, but not to get something from them. Live your life fully, authentically, without the constant spiritual self-improvement project running in the background. And paradoxically, that's when transformation happens, not because you made it happen, but because you stopped preventing it. Leindia. So let's return to where we started. Why are there hidden truths about awakening that we're not supposed to reveal? Because they're bad for business. Because they undermine the spiritual marketplace that depends on selling awakening as the solution to all your problems. Because they reveal that the emperor has no clothes, that most spiritual teaching is ego, talking to ego about transcending ego. Because they make awakening far less appealing to seekers who are actually just seeking spiritual ego inflation. Bammed. But more than that, these truths are hidden because they can't be understood until you've experienced them. And explaining them to people who haven't experienced them often does more harm than good. It's like describing a color to someone who's been blind. The words just create confusion rather than understanding. Kaband. So perhaps there's wisdom in the hiding, not the hiding that comes from trying to sell a sanitized product, but the hiding that comes from recognizing that some truths can only be discovered directly, but explained. And if you're truly on the path, not the path of collecting spiritual experiences or building an enlightened identity, but the path of genuine seeing, these hidden truths will reveal themselves in time. You'll discover them directly in your own experience. And when you do, you'll understand why they're rarely spoken of openly. Maya is different now. She doesn't talk about her awakening anymore. Not because she's hiding it, but because there's nothing to talk about. The person who wanted to talk about awakening, who wanted recognition for being awakened, who needed others to understand, that person dissolved. What remains lives quietly, speaks when spoken to, shares when sharing arises naturally, but has no agenda about enlightening others or being recognized as enlightened. And Simon is the same. He went back to his ordinary life, same job, same relationships, same daily routines. Nothing looks different from the outside, but everything is different from the inside. And he's learned that trying to explain that difference to people who haven't experienced it is futile at best, misleading at worst. Chend, if you're seeking awakening right now, hoping these hidden truths will somehow help you achieve it faster, they won't. If anything, they might discourage you from seeking altogether. And maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. Maybe you need to stop seeking awakening as an achievement and start being present with what already is. Land, because the greatest hidden truth of all is this: you're already what you're seeking. There's no one to awaken because there's no one who's asleep. The separate self, you think, is on a spiritual journey toward enlightenment, is itself the illusion that needs to be seen through. And that seeing doesn't make you enlightened. It reveals that there never was a you to be enlightened in the first place. Lamd, this is the truth that can never be marketed, never be taught in a weekend workshop, never be achieved through effort or spiritual practice. It can only be recognized directly and immediately in this moment, or not recognized, in which case the seeking continues. Lamd, the hidden truths about awakening are not secrets to be protected. They're realities that can only be discovered through direct experience. And if you're genuinely ready for that discovery, no amount of warning about how difficult or disappointing or unglamorous awakening is will stop it from happening. Mind. But if you're seeking awakening as ego wants it, as achievement, as specialness, as solution to your human problems, then these hidden truths might save you years of futile seeking. They might help you see that what you're actually seeking doesn't exist, has never existed, will never exist. Yet, and in that seeing, that recognition that there's nothing to get and no one to get it, the genuine awakening that was never hidden, never absent, always already present, might finally reveal itself, not as an achievement, not as an experience, not as a state to be maintained, but as the simple, obvious, undeniable reality that was always here, hiding in plain sight while you were busy seeking something else. The journey continues. Or rather, the appearance of a journey continues, for no one going nowhere, arriving always and already here,